Okay, so welcome. Again, this is our second webinar in our winter series with the Vermont Agency of Agriculture in collaboration with the Vermont Nursery and Landscaping Association. And today our webinar is going to focus on more of the innards and the details with what we do in the plant health section of the plant industry division with the Vermont Agency of Agriculture. And so I'm the team lead of the plant health section, Emily Inouye. My colleagues, I have the great privilege of working with my colleagues, Judy and Ben, who are going to be leading the webinar today. But before that, maybe Christina, do you want to say a couple words just as an introduction to today?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. I'm Christina Macklin. I'm the Executive Director for the Vermont Nursery and Landscape Association. And I just want to thank everyone, and especially the Agency of Ag and all of you folks. We're just so happy to be able to collaborate on these webinars and grow our relationship further and further. So thank you so much for being here and doing this for our members and associates and friends. So yeah, thanks.
Great. Thank you. We're really excited too. Okay, so without further ado, I want to introduce my team, Judy Rozovsky, who is the state entomologist and the state plant regulatory official, and Ben Dillner, who is our state survey coordinator, and just basically takes care of Judy and I when we lose our way. Quite an organized individual, I have to say. So Ben serves dual roles there. So Judy, Ben, I'm not quite sure who is starting off, but I'm going to hand it over to both of you.
Great, thank you. Ben, do you mind if I just launch into stuff, or do you want to say any preparatory words? And can you go back to that last slide?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, great. So hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. Emmy did introduce us, which I appreciate. I did want to mention that we are part of the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. And we are now in the division of plant industry, which used to be farm, and I will discuss that more momentarily. And Emmy is our team lead for the plant health section. So today we're going to, next slide, please. Talk about, who we are, what we do, and the people we work with. And we're going to cover nursery inspections and sort of what we look for during those, what happens when we do them, and then how all these pieces work together so that we are all cooperating to keep introduced pests out of our agricultural systems. So we do have this new name, and the Division of Plant Industry covers pesticide regulation, weeds, seeds, feeds, and fertilizer, mostly registering those projects and making sure they're used correctly. We're the plant health people, so we regulate the nursery industry and cooperate with the federal government on searching for introduced species. And we also include the apiary unit, and that might be Brooke Decker there. You can't tell in that suit. She's our apiarist. And we also have Patty Casey and Eliza Doncaster doing mosquito and tick work, which is known as vector management. Next slide. So we cover a lot of ground. Emmy already introduced us, so I will just point out that Emmy's holding a Tree of Heaven leaf, and we're looking for those plants. If you happen to see any, please let us know. Next slide. Whoop. Oh, is that okay? Sorry. So what the plant health team does, we also have a number of different tasks. We conduct nursery inspections, which those of you who might be in the nursery industry know. We monitor and search for introduced pest species. We provide ginseng certification for the small group of people who need that. And we work with the federal government on providing phytosanitary certificates for export. So either to send plant material to other states or to send it internationally. And then we issue kiln compliance agreements to attest to the standard procedures for kilns for moving firewood out of state, because firewood, as you might know, is a big pathway for moving different species. Okay, next slide. The authority under which we do these things can be found on the online statutes. I put a link to Chapter 84, which is one of our governing chapters about pests and what we're allowed to do in the pursuit of them. And then Chapter 206 is the nursery statute pertaining to nursery work. I didn't put the link to Chapter 206, but you can just use the same link and put in 206 instead of 84, and that will get you there. But statutes are superseded by rules, and we have two rules that govern our work with nurseries. And one is a noxious weed rule, which is going to be rewritten and renamed shortly. And one is a nursery rule. And you can find both of those if you go to our website, the VAA-FM website, and look for plant health. And there are links to those rules there. It would be good if you're a nursery owner, if you're familiar with those, because they tell you what you should and shouldn't be doing. So we have a list of weeds that should not be sold. And then there are things like nurseries need a license, and nurseries are legally obliged to sell healthy plants. So those are the laws we work with. Next slide. And then federally, we are governed by the Plant Protection Act, which is a really long document. And if you're just eager to read it, you could go to either of these websites and find it. But we basically, as state departments of agriculture, we work as agents of the federal government under certain circumstances. And we have memos of understanding with U.S. Department of Agriculture. APHIS is Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, and PPQ is Plant Protection Quarantine. And PPQ are the people that we work with the most. And the only reason I'm giving you this long acronym is because I'm going to be talking about them. And you should have some sense of who that group is. Next slide, please. We also have a lot of state partners. And so one benefit of being in a small state is that we get to work with a lot of other people. In fact, we're sort of forced to out of necessity. We pool resources. We share goals, and so we can pull resources towards achieving those goals, and those resources can be money or staff or information, websites. So we work closely with all of these groups, including the VNLA. How lucky are we? Next slide. We also have a federal office, Plant Protection Quarantine, PPQ office in Vermont. And Catherine Arroyan is our SPUD, State Plant Health Director. And that acronym shows that somewhere in the US government is someone with a sense of humor. She directs that office, but she's based in New Hampshire. And then Roy Karras and Lindsay Modesto are our two officers in this state. We also work closely with Tony Slowick, who's a plant survey specialist. He's stationed in Maine, but he used to work in Vermont. And we cooperate with them a lot. And we also work with Customs and Border Protection, agricultural specialists to safeguard stuff either coming or going through the border. And we work with Nate Seeger from the U.S. Forest Service, who's been an invaluable asset. So our federal partners are really key to the work we do. Next slide. And so this is just showing a joint operation. We've worked with our colleagues from New Hampshire, with our Vermont PPQ folks, and the Customs and Border Protection agricultural specialists. We have a bunch of ports of entry, they're called, along the border. And this was checking and inspecting Christmas trees that were coming through to see if they were bringing any pests with them. So that's us in action up there. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, well, I didn't mention this, but each state has a state plant health director, a SPUD. Each state also has a state plant regulatory official, which is me in this case, and a state survey coordinator. In Vermont, that's Ben. And so all the state plant regulatory officials, who are known as SPROs, make up the National Plant Board. And the National Plant Board is in a funny position because we represent different states. We don't really have authority over anyone, so we have to coax and convince our colleagues of taking particular actions, or we cooperate with the federal government to use their legal authority to make things happen. But we do work closely. So as a National Plant Board, we work closely with USDA, APHIS, PPQ on big picture plant health issues. Next slide. So this is just a schematic to put all these acronyms in one place, but basically the SPROs and the SSCs are going to communicate with state and agency leadership and with our state partners about plant health issues that are going on. And sometimes these are just pertinent to Vermont, but if they have national or regional implications or international implications, then we would go to the plant board or to our state plant health director, who would communicate with the PPQ leadership. So National Plant Board and PPQ talk at the leadership level a lot. Individual states, if they want to communicate with PPQ, they should go through their SPUD or through the National Plant Board, because these are going to be, again, bigger picture issues and problems. So we need to check that they need to be elevated to that level. We also use our SPUD as a resource. If I have questions like, does PPQ have guidance on alternatives to neonicotinoids? You know, they can provide us with that information. So they're great. Next slide, please. So part of this talk is to sort of explain what we're looking for in nurseries and how and why we regulate them. And to understand that, you have to sort of think of the types of insect pests that are out there. And so that's not types like aphids or, you know, wood borers. It's types like, are they federally regulated? Because that might, in some circumstances, elevate our response to a higher level. Federally quarantined pests are considered regulated federal pests, and they usually have, you know, more details to how you need to address them. This list, well, let me just finish going through this. So then the state can quarantine pests that are not federally regulated. So that, for example, is our hemlock woolly adelgid. We have a quarantine and rules about how that, what happens when that's moved around. But we have a pest of state concern only regulated under our general no pest law, which we are concerned about. And then there are pests like aphids, or this list is a list of federally regulated insect pests. The feds also have a plant list, you know, fungi and diseases that they regulate, which you can find at this website. But something like spotted wing Drosophila, it's on the federal list, it's not funded, and nobody cares. And it's not nobody cares, but it can be addressed using sort of routine pest control methods, and it's not of national import. It's all over the place. It's not going to be eradicated. You're just going to have to deal with it. Something like Asian longhorn beetle, particularly in Vermont, would raise alarm bells. We could ask for an incident command team from the feds. We would get lots of advice, expertise, money, because that pest you can eradicate, and it would also be economically problematic, to say the least, if it arrived in Vermont. So our response to these different insects will depend on their federal and state status, basically, and also our sort of common sense approach. Next slide, please. So just to illustrate that further, so these are not federally regulated pests, but they can be problematic. Oh, brown marmorated stink bug is federally regulated. It is a crop pest in other areas, but not so much in Vermont. So we haven't, you know, hit the alarm button on that one. And things that are widespread and not causing problems, they're just not going to elicit a major response. Something that may be widespread but still problematic, then we might respond to that. So, you know, there's an amount of judgment in our response. Next slide. And I think that I'm going to, oh no, it's right. Sorry, Ben is going to take over in a minute. But I just wanted to mention that we aren't also randomly choosing which pests we regulate. We work closely with a group called the National CAPS Committee. CAPS is a cooperative agricultural pest survey. The leads are pictured here. And they develop a national priority pest list based on various sources of information. And those would be the pests that we look for in our survey work, which Ben will tell you more about.
Mhm.
All right, Ben.
Yeah, so I'll dive into nursery inspections, some details about that, since this is a nursery and landscaping group, and just some, kind of an overview about, kind of what to expect during a nursery inspection if you're maybe a new nursery owner or unfamiliar with the process. Generally, it's mostly Ben, Judy, and myself who are out there during the summertime and growing season. We also, have some technicians each year, and Emmy also will join as staff members who are actually doing the inspections. But when we arrive, we always like to, check in with the owner or the manager, and checking that the nursery has a current nursery license, which the rules state that if you are selling more than $1,000 worth of plant stock in Vermont, then you need to have a license. And there's two different kind of tiers based on nursery size for those licenses. And then, we will walk all around and try to look at all the different plant material on site that's in the sale areas. And also, if they have kind of production or outplantings, we'll try to look at that because there can always could be like a reservoir for pests lurking out some in the back 40. Don't want that. And then we'll return back to the folks working there and provide a report and discuss any findings and next steps. And then there could be it's rare, but could be potential regulatory actions or stop sales if we were to find something that we have to regulate. And then we also like to use it as an opportunity to provide outreach material and discuss incoming or pests that we're at risk for. So, some more detail of what we actually look for when we're doing an inspection. Kind of all those pests that Judy was mentioning that are, federally regulated or state regulated or quarantined or just general, general plants that don't look very good. Could be diseased or, infested with something or abiotic issues. Yeah, essentially making that sure, it's kind of a consumer protection type service that we can be providing, making sure that plants are viable and healthy, that they're not, actively dying or declining, they're doing well and will thrive when they, hopefully get to someone's house. And then, as Judy mentioned, our noxious weed rule, or, which will now be called the regulated introduced plant species rule. So these are plants, noxious weed or ornamentals that cannot be sold because of their risk to the environment. So a lot of there's of course a whole giant suite of things that can cause issues, and those can manifest as leaf damage. Could be insect feeding, like this maple leaf cutter here. Could be more leaf beetles that are skeletonizing the leaves on this viburnum, or could be fungal or bacterial leaf spotting, like on this dogwood here. Um, and it's always interesting to see, when it as the season progresses, it always things start out nice and fresh, the leaves, and then you start to sort of accumulate things throughout the season on the leaves, and it's almost like a record of what's been occurring all summer. Of course, looking for critters, usually arthropod pests. So it could be aphids, which everybody's familiar with. I like these red aphids that we found on this Heliopsis. But aphids come in all colors and shapes. The other one that well, it can cause a lot of damage on sweet potato vine, but golden tortoise beetle is always a very pretty insect. And then a less pretty insect is magnolia scale, which will have sort of a secondary effect of this sooty mold that is nasty goop on the stem and leaves. And a lot of these aren't really federally regulated pests, but they're pests that we don't really want to have spreading to other folks properties, or causing the plant to decline and not be saleable. Or also they could be potentially vectoring other diseases like bacteria or viruses. Then I just, kind of call this category dieback, which could be, caused from abiotic issues like drought or overwatering or even frost, or it could be caused by root fungi or things like Phytophthora, which I think is affecting this rhododendron here, that, kind of cause whole plant mortality. And then I think this was a drought situation or lack of watering on these plants here, sitting out in a hot parking lot. So there's all number of things. I've seen a lot over my years of inspections, but there's always new things every year, so it keeps it interesting. All right, so yeah, I'll talk a little bit more specifically about introduced weeds or regulated introduced plant species. So when we're talking about that, these are highly competitive ornamentals in some cases, or they can also be sort of what I like to call passenger plants, plants that are very good at sort of hitchhiking along on nursery stock or mulch or other types of material. And then that oftentimes, breaks down into sort of intentional versus unintentional movement of these plants, through, and then, they could be moving through sale or installation of landscapes. And then, of course, seeds moving in soil, mulch, or on equipment. So that's always good to, be aware of. And, as I mentioned, roots and rhizomes in pots and substrates, and especially balled and burlap plants that maybe, dug directly out of the field, because, they've been growing in the native soil versus sort of a sterile media. So these are, some examples of ornamentals that are not allowed to be sold in Vermont. They are, still tend to be present in the nursery trade. Things like Nori maple, barberry, burning bush, or euonymus, hammer maple, water hyacinth. These are still in the trade throughout the U.S. and it's really up to the nursery owner to be familiar with the list. And that's linked on our website, and to not be ordering these and bringing them into the state. And this is not a full comprehensive list, but just some examples that are commonly found. And then so here's some examples that are of plants that are also regulated, but may not necessarily be intentionally in the trade. Things like Asiatic bittersweet, bishop's weed, myelin minute vine, and pale swallowwort. And this is a picture of a balled and burlap root ball that is heavily infested with bishop's weed, and so probably not something you want to be installing as a nice landscape tree that brings along a pretty difficult to get rid of weed like bishop's weed or goutweed. So yeah, I'll tap in Judy for these couple slides here.
Right. So when we are out there diligently inspecting nurseries, what happens when we find something? And as I mentioned earlier, it kind of depends on what type of pest it is. But in general, we don't want to see pests of any kind, even the common variety, traveling through the nursery trade. So if we find something that's just a common pest, we'll probably just talk to the nursery owner. We'll also ask them to move that material so it's not right where customers are going to reach out and grab it. Then, as I mentioned, federally regulated pests can garner more resources in terms of personnel, money, federal assistance, maybe even state assistance from our state partners too. State regulated pests, well, I'll talk about how we respond to those in a minute, but generally we want infested material destroyed, returned, or treated. In some cases though, like greenhouses always have white flies and aphids. I'll just mention to the owner that those are present and maybe guide them to resources of how to better manage that. So here's, as I mentioned, the brown marmorated stink bug. It is an introduced species. It is on the federal list, but it is not funded and it's not causing harm. So we kind of review each pest like, should we be addressing this in a mild-mannered way or a more severe way? And that really is based on the level of damage and harm that it's causing. Next slide, please. And how many resources we have to address it. So we can find pests in a number of different ways that are in the nursery trade, in addition to the inspections we conduct. Sometimes a neighboring state or a production state will send infested material. It either has a disease or an insect or something that shouldn't be there. The state that receives it might have sent that on to a subset of states. So they will notify those states. That's called a trace forward, like, hey, really sorry, these plants came to you. So then our job is to track those down and make sure they're appropriately dealt with. Then sometimes nurseries will self-report. They'll come to us and say, hey, we're finding this thing on our plants. Can you help us? So then we go and, direct them to resources or provide them with management information, or direct them to resources for management information. And then also sometimes there's a consumer complaint, like, I bought this plant and it had insects all over it. And those will probably just go to the nursery owner and have them exchange the plant for a healthy one and remind them that they're supposed to sell healthy plants. So we follow up with these fines unless it's something really mild-mannered. And the options are either to return the material to the source, treat it, or destroy it. In the case of federal pests, we're going to try to do this as rapidly as possible, and we usually do it with the assistance of our federal colleagues. And then to trace backwards is to find out where that material came from in the first place, like which production nursery sent those plants that had the issues. Next slide, I think, is yours. So Ben is going to give us some specific examples of things we found in Vermont.
So this past year, early in the spring, we had a thrips parvospinus trace forward. Basically, so we got notified that some plants were potentially infested with thrips parvospinus, which is kind of a newer pest that's been working its way through the nursery trade. It had potentially gone to 2 different nurseries in Vermont. So we, followed up with those businesses, and then did some inspections there, and then we did actually find some kind of lightly infested material at one of the nurseries, and then we were that material essentially was destroyed because we did find that pest on it. And there's just some examples. So it can infest a lot of tropical foliage plants. It's a big problem down in Florida, but it can also go after some veggie species like pepper. And it's super tiny, but at least the females are much darker than the Western flower thrips that folks may be more used to seeing. So another thing we dealt with a lot this past year was elongate hemlock scale. We had multiple shipments from multiple states that arrived that were infested. Elongate hemlock scale, if people aren't familiar, it's a scale insect that infests hemlocks and fir trees mainly. It can be very difficult to get rid of. It has a couple different life stages, and adults are these very protected scales that can overwinter in that form. So in this case, we were kind of notified about shipments incoming of hemlocks, and went and looked at them, and they were infested. And at that point, it was kind of too late to return them in that situation. So we put them under stop sale. So they had to be kind of quarantined within the nursery. And then we discussed with the owner and this, so kind of a specific situation here. It was before the neonicotinoid pesticide ban went into place. So treating those with a systemic neonic was still an option because it was earlier in the spring last year. And then so the owner was able to hire someone to do that. And then we had to monitor these trees for over 2 months, inspecting weekly to ensure that the treatment was was effective because there's all different life stages, and just because it may kill the larval or crawler stage, the adults may still be intact. So we had to kind of keep monitoring for a longer period of time. And then eventually, it was shown that the treatment was actually in fact effective. So the trees were able to be released for sale. But then yeah, I think we'll talk a little bit later about the more specific regulations about hemlock. But yeah, it's kind of just shows you never really can predict what kind of pests may show up. And we have, seen this show up, in Vermont, and there are some isolated populations of this pest, but it is still a pretty big threat to hemlock. And yeah, so some examples of stop sales of regulated introduced plants or noxious weed species. Luckily, last year we did not have any, which is great. But the year before we had a number of them. We had some that were, some burning bush. We had several Norway maples that we had to stop sale, and I think all of these ended up getting destroyed just because there wasn't really a way to return them, and they can't really be treated in that sense like other pests. The wineberry was kind of an interesting example. I was doing an inspection over in Lamoille County, and I saw some raspberries that looked quite interesting, and they actually were wineberry, which was more recently added to our sort of regulatory framework of plants that can't be sold because they're a risk to the environment. And then in this case, they were already producing seeds, through the fruit. So we wanted to make sure that those didn't get sold. And so that case, I think it was some kind of a propagation error that they were labeled as red raspberry, but they definitely weren't. And I think wineberry, which is in that same genus as raspberry, may have been used in breeding purposes or propagation, but so it was kind of a supplier issue, not really the Vermont nursery's fault in that case. But definitely, shows why it's important for us to be, aware of all different things when we're out there.
Hey, there
All
was
right,
a
so
quick question.
go
Do
ahead,
we
Bonnie.
want to just take that? Oh, okay. Sorry, never mind.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can take it.
Oh,
Well, yeah.
I had raised, you already answered it. I was confused about how at this point in everybody's knowledge base, how a nursery would end up with like a euonymus and not understand. But if it's a propagation issue, then thank you. Answered. All good.
Well, the wineberry was only the only propagation issue from the supplier. All these other ones were a case of folks not being aware of the rule, and ordering these plants for sale. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, that just shows why it's important for us to have all this outreach and collaboration with VNLA, and keep sending our message. But it was very heartening to see that last year we didn't have any folks selling plants they shouldn't. So that was great. All right, so I'll switch a little bit gears here, talking about more of our active pest monitoring through our trapping, which these are federally funded surveys. The Cooperative Agricultural Pest Survey, or CAPS, funds a number of different surveys focusing on some high risk sites and commodities like nurseries, Christmas tree farms, and oak commodity, which tends to be sort of like public land areas like state parks. And then Plant Protection Act is sort of another pool of money. And then we that's a little bit more like a la carte type surveys where we can we do kind of switch them out year after year. So this one called Exotic Wood Boring and Bark Beetle Survey, a lot of conifer pests in that one. And then one that we started doing more recently is focused on greenhouse crop pests. And here's just a picture of one of our technicians hanging one of these funky looking traps, but I'll show you our trap types in a second here. Yeah, so we have all different types of insect traps. Most of these are to target beetles and moths. So this, called a panel trap. And it has a pheromone lures that attract insects, and then the beetles will fly into it, and then they'll drop down into this catchment container. And then some of them also are sticky, like folks might be familiar with this the purple prism trap, which is, can catch things like emerald ash borer and other buprestid type beetles. And then bucket traps, usually for moths, and then funnel traps, another type of trap for beetles. Let's see here. Oh yeah, this is just showing some of our list of trap sites from a couple years ago. So we try to get to, usually it's at least 8 to 10 counties throughout the state, all over the place. It doesn't actually our PPQ, our federal partners, they will set some traps, usually more on the eastern side of the state, so it doesn't show that here. So we pretty much have, most every county, maybe except for Essex County, covered. Actually, I think they have traps in Canaan. So yeah, so we have it pretty well covered, but it does mean a lot of driving around the state. But we usually have at least one or two technicians that help us seasonally. And then when we actually get our samples of insects, in these the beetle type traps, we call them wet cups, and we use sort of a solution of non-toxic antifreeze that they fall into and drown and are preserved, and then we'll put them in the freezer and store them until we have kind of enough to send out. And these are generally getting identified by the Carnegie Museum of Natural History. So very thankful to those folks for sifting through all those those gross samples. Some of the things, we like the hemlock pests or things we may find in nurseries visually, we're identifying ourselves. And then we also do have other federal identifiers that we can send things like moths to. Okay, so I'll just go over a couple of different target pests and sites that we're focusing on more specifically. Box tree moth, which is one that's working its way through the nursery industry. Not in Vermont yet, as far as we know, but it's in Canada, New York, and some surrounding states. Really only is going after boxwood, box tree, but it can really decimate the plantings or nursery stock. And this is one that we are actively trapping for in our nursery and retail plant survey. So yeah, I mentioned the greenhouse crop survey. That one is targeting mostly solanaceous pests, some cucurbit type pests, and all these are not really, they don't tend to be found in the area. I may not even be in the US yet. But we're using things like this Delta trap, which have a sticky card in there. And then we have at least 10 different sites, commercial growers of vegetables, greenhouse production, tomatoes, cucumbers, greens, and then we're setting those traps, checking them every 2 weeks. So yeah, these are 3 different targets of insect pests for that survey: silver wine moth, tomato leaf miner, and old world bollworm. Yeah, another one that we've been doing for quite a while is a Christmas tree farm survey. These are all conifer pests. Things like large pine weevil, for black fur sawyer, some different bark beetles, and longhorn beetles. Yeah, I don't necessarily expect you to really read this, but this is kind of a full list of our pests here, and the different surveys that those go with. And I'll move along here because I think we're maybe short on time. Here's an example of so yeah, usually we get a lot of negative data, which is great. But in this case, we did have a positive this past year for a pest, which is, I think, recently federally deregulated, but called Trichoceros campestris, or velvet longhorn beetle. We found that in one of our EWBB traps in Chittenden County. Potentially may have come in on wood packing material, but we're not quite sure. But we'll do some additional trapping and survey for that this coming year. And that one is mostly tends to infest cut wood, but could also potentially infest fruit trees. Okay, so now we'll kind of dive into our call to action. I'll tag in Judy here. But yeah,
Um,
essentially, our messaging is always, starting clean and staying clean. All right, I'll pass it to you, Judy.
Okay, well, I was wondering if we just want to skip the sanitation part and go and just review some of the incoming pests, or if I should just talk fast and.
You just talk fast because I think
All right.
well,
All right. So next slide. I'll stay short. So there basically a couple of system-wide approaches for dealing with pests. One of them is integrated pest management, which you've probably heard about, but that's where you use sort of all means possible, including, and I don't have my notes, which would be handy, monitoring, scouting, prevention, and then controlling the pests through biological, cultural, physical, and chemical means. PPQ is really moving to the system approach for nursery certification called SANC. And this is mostly for production nurseries. And it's basically best management practices. But the idea is you do a pest risk analysis and try to see where the pests are coming in and then figure out what you can do to prevent that. And if you're just eager to find out more, I have a link on there. Next slide. One thing that would be great if we could convince more nurseries or other people who receive plants to do is just check the stuff when it's on the trunk, look at the stems to see if they're cankers, let's see if there's defoliation. Do they look like a healthy plant or are they unhappy? And then check the roots, like yank 5 plants out of the pots. Are they root bound? Are there worms? Are there ants? Is there anything that should not be there? Do they look like they're diseased? Is the outer part of the roots coming off? So just your basic stuff. Next slide. Basic quick check. Winter is a great time to like completely clean out your area. And I've listed here some specific insects and diseases that can be eliminated by just getting rid of the debris that's around. Next slide, please. Some of the things that we're at risk for, and we'll go into these in a little more detail shortly. So spotted lanternfly hitchhike on everything. They just get on everything. And we are going to get them at some point. Our response might be more limited now than it would have been a few years ago. The resources are diminishing. They're not causing a lot of harm to crops except vineyards. Box tree moth, which Ben showed you that slide, coming in on box trees. It's also spreading naturally. They flew across the border and ate somebody's topiary in New York, which sounds sort of funny, but it's it was a problem. Imported fire ants, who knew? I never thought they'd be a threat up in New England, but they're moving in the nursery trade in hibiscus plants. And they go, like bars and restaurants order these plants, and then the ants come out and bite people. It's not popular. So some things move by hitchhiking, some by natural spread. They're hard to stop, but we do what we can. Next slide, please. So we're just gonna, I like to get done maybe by 10:50 so people can ask questions. And spotted lanternfly, I just mentioned, this is what their egg masses look like when they're on trees, which is how they move through the nursery trade. They're really hard to spot. They like to be up in the canopy and they look like a little blob of lichen. So look out for those. Next slide, please. And
sorry, I'll just say that these the slides we're highlighting like how these specific pests can be vectored was what I was also highlighting with some of these, but
okay, yeah, sorry. I was doing the rapid tour, but you're right. And so the nymphs and adults of the spotted lanternfly can also get all over anything that's moving into the nursery. Pallets with plastic wrap are a big attractant, and they can be in potted plants. Usually they're dead in potted plants because they've been treated, and that's fine. All right, thanks. Next slide. Then the beetle, formerly known as the Asian longhorn beetle, now the starry sky beetle, that moves on firewood, logs. It's a borer. It goes into the tree. You can't see it. And they can also fly, but they have appeared in big jumps. They went from Massachusetts. The next finding was in Ohio. They had been in Chicago and New York. And then they went from Ohio to South Carolina. Not quite sure how, maybe on firewood that people were moving in a trailer when they came to the state. So don't move firewood. Next slide, please. Hemlock woolly adelgid, yeah, it might be moving naturally, but the infestations, so mostly hemlock woolly adelgid is confined to the southern part of the state. It's in Windham County pretty heavily. There's a couple of places in Bennington County. It's moving north into Windsor County, but it's also up in Chittenden County and a couple of places, and those moved on trees through the nursery industry. And again, I'm not blaming the nursery industry for this. It's just something we need to be aware of and look out for. And we in plant health are trying to enforce this and help nurseries not bring this stuff in. Next slide. Same for its little friend, elongate hemlock scale. And the reason we harp on this insect is that hemlock woolly adelgid combined with elongate hemlock scale is much more, has a synergistic effect that's much more fatal to trees and has killed, thousands, hundreds of thousands of trees further south. We're lucky because it's colder here and there's winter mortality, but these are a big problem. And like hemlock woolly adelgid, they're also can be moved through the nursery trade. Again, no blame, no shame, just trying to keep them out of here. Next slide. So we do have a quarantine on hemlock woolly adelgid. Anything coming into the state needs a certificate of inspection and we need to be notified, and then we run down and check the trees. We tried treating them, but some of the treatments can take a really long time to take effect. And we feel that the most appropriate way to address these now moving forward is to either return them or destroy the trees. Particularly now that we have the neonicotinoid ban and the more effective treatments are not something we're able to use for ornamental plants. Next slide.
I can talk about jumping worm.
You want to talk about it? No, I
Sure.
can talk about it. Jumping worm is something, again, it's we chose not to regulate it for several reasons. It's all over the place. It's hard to identify, except in 2 months out of the year. The eggs are really difficult to see, and there were no treatments available for it. Joseph Gores has been testing products for their efficacy on this insect, and we might talk more about that at the winter meeting that's coming up on the 12th. So these are the different ways that those can work. And then, it moves through mulch and compost. It too can climb into a lot of different things, plant pots, really hard at the moment to control and get rid of. But you can be vigilant and, like I said, pull the plant out of the pot and see if they're in there, in which case put it in a different pot with sterile soil. Next slide. Beech leaf disease, horror story, nightmare, spreading. We have found it in nurseries. It does seem to be moving through the wild pretty quickly. There is a fungicide that can be applied to it. There's a nematode that causes this. It seems to move with wind and water. These things just get swept away. It's not really clear of some of those mechanisms. It's pretty new. It's moved pretty fast. And I hope we find something that can stop it because, as you know, beech are a pretty vital plant for wildlife. Next slide. Ben, do you want to do the reporting tips and the sort of?
Sure. Yeah, I can close this out. I think we're essentially at the end here, but we have time for questions. So just, just want to emphasize, folks, if they whether have nursery or not, if you see something interesting or unique that you're concerned with, or even just you want kind of an ID, Judy loves to receive, kinds of funky insect or bug samples or pictures. But just, some kind of reporting and collection tips here. When you're, seeing something new, taking good records of location, the host plant or kind of environment it was found in, the date, time, that kind of thing. Take pictures that are close up in focus with, a ruler for scale. Try to get, multiple different angles, underside, top side, all different angles. And then, saving specimen for insects and arthropods, the best method usually is to, and if if you think it's a pest that you want to, that we should be, collecting and worried about, saving in the freezer, which will generally kill it for insects. I definitely want to emphasize with spotted lanternfly, definitely try to capture and kill it, and don't just take a picture and let it fly free. Um, and then for plant samples, infested leaves or other branch or plant material that might be damaged being in a freezer, storing in a bag in the fridge is usually the best option. And then for other types of material, double bagging, things like wood material or soil, can be your best bet. But I think that's all we have here. So thank you for your
Thanks.
attention, and I can have any questions. Yeah, go ahead, Jody.
No, I was just saying thanks to everybody who came and listened, and hope you learned something.
I have a quick question. I have actually questions.
Great.
How closely do you guys work with UVM Extension and the diagnostic lab up there? I'm just curious about that resource and if that's something that you guys use at all.
Totally. Yes. Ann Hazel Rigg is a gift to us.
Good. I thought so. I just wanted to check.
And she's great, like she'll just check nursery samples,
Yep.
if a nursery contacts me and I go down and pick something up, I can bring it to her. She'll figure it out. We'll figure out a response. She's just been fabulous. And she's retiring soon.
I do know that. Yes, we all should be worried about that. I think, yeah, for sure.
Are.
Yeah. Have you been able to have any conversations about that with the head of extension there, or probably not yet?
Not
No,
yet.
but that's a good idea that we might want to bring
Yep.
that up. Thank you,
Yeah.
Christina.
Yeah. And you might have received an email. I was contacted last week by somebody who was trying to locate a pesticide applicator.
Okay.
And I don't know, he was going to email your department. I tried to help him out, and when I went on the website to look for a name, the only way I could find, or the database basically asks you to put in an ID number for an applicator. Like, you couldn't get a list of people that are licensed. So
You can
just
request one and we can send it to you.
Okay.
Or
Awesome.
contact Bethany Creaser down at Ag,
Okay.
and she's our remember Annie, she took over that position. So
Yep.
because it's in our database, and I think
Okay.
access is restricted, but if you request it, then she'll give you the list of names and
Great. Then
numbers.
next time I get that phone call, I can answer that question.
Yeah. And I think the requesting it is the way to go. Since it's a dynamic list.
Uh-huh.
If we just posted something, anybody who comes afterwards isn't listed there, and
Yeah.
there is just a fairness equity issue. So,
Okay.
if you reach out, we can generate the most current one in that moment in time. And I think that's probably the fairest thing for us to do. But we're
Okay.
always willing to help out. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Probably that person hopefully reached out to somebody there. So, but great. Thank you. That's it for me, I think.
Okay, great. Those are great.
But-
Anybody else who
I do
had a
want to
quick-
say
Oh.
thank you for all the work you're doing too. Like, I know it's a slog out there, driving all over the state and, keeping your eye out for all these things. So I appreciate all the work you guys do. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Thank you. No.
Judy, I actually have an email. You were so responsive. I sent one last week, and I was thrilled to have a quick reply about nursery licensing. So thank you. I wondered about pests commonly associated with unrooted cuttings or like germination propagation houses, versus more adult trees and shrubs, etc., that would be better hosts. Are there things more likely to show up in a propagation situation?
I'm gonna turn that over to Ben. Botany Ben.
Yeah, well, so we definitely have some resources we can direct you to. I think, yeah, like places like UMass, Amherst, and Cornell have a lot of good resources. But I'll just say, yeah, top of my head, wait, so are these cuttings that you're bringing in from out of state from other nurseries, or are they kind of ones that you're taking from your own mother plants?
No, they would probably be out of state. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so they're yeah, things like the thrips species I highlighted, that could be an issue depending on the type of species. I mean, if it's unrooted cuttings, I'd say they're fairly low risk because, they don't have any other really material with them, but there could always be, fungal or viral pathogens that, if they look diseased or something, then it may not be worth trying to plant them. I do
Totally.
know people will oftentimes do some kind of a dunk with them. They'll like maybe dip a whole bundle of cuttings in some kind of a um, maybe a very mild sanitizing solution, or also like a what is it, like a plant growth promoting material that
Okay.
can just
Like
give
a
them like
biofertilizer or something?
yeah, biofertilizer that can
Mm,
just give them a boost. But yeah, I mean,
yeah.
if they look really clean and good, starting out, and then you keep them, in a protected environment, they usually have a pretty good chance of doing well.
Okay.
Right. And to speak more to that question, Kate, I knew your name from somewhere. I just couldn't remember where. So like Ben said, when they're in a sheltered environment, they're lower risk. If you have something in a greenhouse or production facility, you're controlling entry to that. Usually, if you're smart, you sure are. But when the trees are outside, then they're open to those pathways
Yeah.
that pests move through. And again, it depends on like if you're an apple tree, everything is going to try to get you. That's just, if you're something like a spruce, there's a more specialized set of insects that are going to go after that. So, but yeah, the more you can protect the tree physically, the lower risk it is, I guess.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I it was nice to hear too that the surroundings around a production facility or a nursery are taken into consideration, because that is a good, we are in Vermont, so that is a component. But I just also think this was wonderful. By the way, this was so helpful, and I really appreciate you all taking the time this morning. I got a lot out of
Oh,
this, so
thanks.
thank you.
Great.
Thanks
Thank
for saying
you.
that.
Yeah. Alrighty.
All right. Any last questions while you have these two available?
We will
Luckily,
be at the VNI meeting next week. So
Yeah.
Yes.
Christina's
that's what I
probably
was
gonna
just gonna say. Yeah.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you, everybody, and hope to see folks next week. But thank you, Christina, again for working with us on this, and everybody have a wonderful rest of your week. And thanks for coming.
All right.
You too.
Take
Thank
care.
Thanks, Judy, Ben.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.